Another weekend. Well, it's been 2 weeks that I've been away. And I'm back with you, Numbskulls. Having a bit of tipple. Thank you.
I didn't miss you.
Well,
I was in charge while you were away.
how did that go?
Went very well, actually.
Actually, I watched the show. It wasn't too bad.
Yeah, apparently the scenery improved a little bit.
Well, only because a certain viewer commented that you were dressed like me.
Bad. Well, he actually had a jacket.
Yes, I noticed.
Yeah.
You own one.
Yes, I was forced to buy one by a business partner.
Anyway, speaking of jackets.
You're looking quite conventional today.
Yeah, what's going on?
Did you have some serious meetings?
Oh, no.
You look like you had to see the bank. You had to see the bank manager.
No. This is actually my Friday dress down.
Really?
Yeah.
Right.
My conventional Friday dress down.
Right.
Yeah.
We see. Or not.
So you
And what
look like you're drinking something interesting.
Yeah, actually, it's very interesting.
Heated shrub.
So we had a meeting with Sakai from CZI, and she watches the show, and she thought, you know what, she was going to contribute to my tea collection. And she actually makes this tea, and it's called Mutombo.
She makes it herself.
She does. It's
That's
Oriental hibiscus, and it's Mutombo. And from what I understand, it's Ndau for medicine. I don't know if
Well, you
you're
clearly need
familiar.
some help. I think. Does she also practice as a psychiatrist?
So is this what us in the northern parts of the country call guju?
Apparently.
So I don't know guju.
Apparently. Yeah, apparently. So I'm going to try it out. It's got a lovely color.
It looks like wine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay, it's
a lovely aroma.
This is the most interesting shrub juice you've tried on the show by far. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's actually find out. Let me taste.
Okay,
and
please
we'll
please
find
pour
out.
some.
So
While
I'm
he's
gonna pour
pouring,
some.
what are you having?
Well, I'm having sparkling wine. This particular Miss Molly South African brute has an interesting backstory. So while you were away, Tinashe and I went to the ZNCC conference, and on one of the nights, we had dinner at the Boma. And because Ranga was paying, I
He had 2 bottles, I must say.
And you still have a
Over
job.
a 2-hour period.
And he still has a job.
but they
Or
bludgeoned
did,
us.
or did Ranga take it off your pay?
Well, I don't know. Well, I haven't been paid yet, so don't give him any ideas.
Maybe that's why you haven't been paid yet. Anyway, yeah.
And they bludgeoned us. They wanted $35 for a bottle. And when I got back, I went to a bunch of wine retailers, and I discovered that this actually retails for only $10. So
There's a whole rabbit hole there around.
we were whinging in the last
Why
episode
like
about Vic
abusing-
Falls being incredibly expensive, and maybe Tinashe reckons it's because they don't have traffic, but maybe they don't have so much traffic because they're so ridiculously expensive.
But anyway, okay. I'm having Nederburg private collection Pinotage.
Why are you having something different from him?
I wasn't really feeling the sparkling wine. And Libby, who you may remember from the end of last season, encouraged me to try it out.
All right.
So I'm actually a little bit nervous.
She didn't just encourage you; she brought you a bottle. I think you should be a bit more thankful.
Well, I'm very grateful. Thank you, Libby. But I'm a little bit nervous because Pinotage is, they say it's the most prominent region that grows Pinotage in the world is South Africa. And they say Pinotage is like a South African. You either love him or you hate him.
Mm-hmm.
And my general experience with Pinotage has been the latter.
Wow.
So, wish me luck.
Cheers.
Cheers.
And how's the shrub juice?
No, it's actually good. It's good.
But it's not bad. Good choice, Libby. But okay, I'll tell you how it feels tomorrow morning because that's the other part of your experience with the South African.
Oh, right.
Well, she only brought you one bottle, so I think tomorrow morning you'll be fine.
We'll see. Gentlemen, it's been a very interesting...
Rufaro, don't you need another bottle?
No, I most certainly am going to stick to just the one.
But it's a third of the price. Anyway, gentlemen, it's been a eventful week. But I think one of the key news stories has been this budget conference in the Vic Falls. You guys last week talked about why do we have to go to the Vic Falls to discuss stuff, but anyway, this is a story for another day. Parliament went there. They're discussing the budget with Mtuli. He says he's received requests from ministries for 3 trillion Zim dollars. I'd like to see their budget guidelines on what they've extrapolated prices to be in December next year. But okay, the ministries have asked for $3 trillion. He's offering 900 billion. There's a gap of 2.1 trillion.
It's clear there's a lot of wishful thinking happening.
But important question, what should he do? He's got 3 choices. He can balance the budget, he can budget a deficit, or he can budget a surplus. Which should he be doing?
Okay, so before we get into that, there's a joke that goes around the banking sector that the only correct number on an annual report or budget numbers, it's the page number. And I think this is classic case of what's in a number. And you have Mtuli saying one number, you have everybody saying the other numbers, and what do those numbers mean? And what I was doing as you were talking, George, was I was calculating in my head what the implied inflation rate is. And that's really what we must discuss, because the ministries are telling us a particular implied inflation rate, and the minister has his own implied inflation rate. And I think his implied inflation rate would be close to double, because I think the last budget
like 100%.
100%. The last budget was around 500, about 535, somewhere there.
So maybe about 80%.
About 80%. That's what he's looking at. And
but he said he was going to hit 30-something percent this year.
This is what I love about numbers, right? Like, forget the numbers, but look into the implied assumptions of those numbers, right? Yeah. So, and that's what I'm trying to say to the audience.
So you're saying, so line ministries are saying, well, it's actually going to be 400%.
It's actually
300%.
Right, exactly. Because I don't think that the line ministries are any more adventurous than they were this year, right? So I think that they're in line with, okay, this is how much it costs to run the ministry this year. And we think that next year, this is how much it will cost us. You're looking at, civil service salaries, just on that line item on its own. That's going to go up, I think, 200 or 300% when you look at coming into next year. So like I said, any number you see, never really read into the actual number. But what you need to do is to read into the assumptions that make up that number. That's really what I go for. So I look at what the finance minister had said last year and what the budget was last year and what he's implying this year. And he's looking at an implied inflation rate of around 80%, unless he's very ambitious and adventurous in the coming year. But you look at his growth rate, he's looking at 2022, the economy growing at 5.3%. I think that's the assumption.
So he's looking at a 70 or 80% inflation next year.
Yeah.
Okay, but,
So my 2 cents on this.
So when I was away, you guys lost all discipline, right?
No, I was in charge, and the show ran. The trains on the show ran on time.
According to what Rufaro wanted.
So the original question was, should Mtuli plan for a balanced budget, a surplus, or a deficit?
Well, ideally, you should plan for a balanced budget. That's what you want for any minister. And I think the only people who do it very well around the world are the Germans usually have a slight surplus. But I think the British have done a fantastic job in being austere and pushing budgets that are balanced for a very long time.
But do you agree? Is this something that a poor country should be doing?
No, look, I think, you see, but the problem with running a deficit in this part of the world is that we tend to then
Get carried away.
recklessly, and then all the good work in terms of the actual spending gets lost in inflation. The damage done by devaluation. So I think from a Zimbabwean perspective, as long as we have a Zim dollar budget, we should aim for a balanced budget or surplus. But
We've got a surplus.
Is it a surplus though?
It's not.
So unpack that. Why is it not a surplus? They're reporting a surplus. Should we not take it at face value?
There are two arms of government that are very important when we look at the fiscus. Unfortunately, our central bank has taken on another leg, which ordinarily shouldn't, but unfortunately, that's in this part of the world, they've taken it upon themselves to get into quasi-fiscal activities. So we look at what's happening.
Should we even I feel like the word, when we say quasi-fiscal, it's meaningless. The quasi part, it's fiscal, right? They're just getting into fiscal activities.
The quasi
it's an important distinction, without a distinction, but it's important.
Yeah, it is.
It's like
the quasi is
what does the quasi mean?
It's an acknowledgement that this shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be happening with this arm of the state.
But it's still fiscal.
But it's the central bank is not.
Because why it's important? So to the common man, it's not important. The government printed money, they spent money they didn't have. But why it becomes important for people that read and people that think is the government is giving you certain numbers that say they've got a surplus.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this
spending
that they've
done through the Reserve Bank.
Yes.
And they shouldn't. So the Reserve Bank is carrying the subsidies, the exchange rate losses, a whole lot of other items that they're carrying. Mm-hmm. If they were honest, what should happen is at the end of the year, they should take all those losses and then they should come through the budget. And I think that's the problem I have with parliamentarians who are in Victoria Falls, and it has not occurred to them
drinking bottles of wine at $35 that should cost 10.
Exactly.
Hopefully their employers not paying for that.
It hasn't occurred to them that the first thing that they should ask the Minister of Finance is what's going to happen with everything that's located at the central bank.
What I was going to say to you, sorry to interject, isn't that perhaps...
He's back. Pointing.
But isn't that... You're not wearing socks, probably.
I am. Are you drunk?
Not yet. But isn't that where the two implicit inflation assumptions are meeting? Perhaps the ministries know what they actually spent this year.
That's exactly...
So maybe they're not actually looking at a 300%. Maybe they're actually closer to 80%, like Mtuli. But they know what they actually spent this year. They might not know how it's been accounted for between the central government and Reserve Bank. Mm. And when they're putting in their votes for next year, they're simply saying this is what we need.
Absolutely. So they will have... So what you're just saying is the ministries, the line ministries, do not have an algorithm, right? They know exactly what they need to spend. But the Ministry of Finance have an algorithm of how somewhat what you're spending can eventually become a surplus because it's hidden somewhere. So I think, yes, there is reverse engineering that's happening there, but I think we can read into when I look at what the ministries are doing, I don't think that they're overambitious. I think they're just telling us exactly what they are spending and what they see. So I tend to believe those numbers. In real terms, nothing has changed, but they're just giving us a glimpse of the implied inflation that's in the economy.
Okay.
And those costs are usually being borne by the central bank rather than the Ministry of Finance.
So, both of you think Mtuli, if Mtuli was listening to you, he would achieve a balanced budget. Now, to do that, he must either increase revenue or reduce spending. Without too many words, which do you think he should pursue?
Oh, you should cut spending. The government is profligate. It spends far too much money.
You sound like an accountant.
Well, no. I think it actually speaks to his mindset, which is we're not demand economists. So we don't believe in, we believe in cutting expenditure. That if the government...
small government as well.
Small government. So if the government must not be in any way adventurous with people's money, what it should do is actually cut expenditure. And then what it does is then gives a lot of space to the private sector. I mean, there's one thing that no one ever talks about is how over the last 3 years, the government has actually overcrowded the financial system in the country. And part of it is because if you're running a deficit and if you're running this big government idea, what it tends to do is you're taking money savings away from the financial system, and you're putting it into government, running a government, and instead of in production. So I think I tend to agree with Rufaro that what the minister should be worried about is actually reducing tax, reducing expenditure, and ensuring that the money that the government is using goes into a dollar of production. And how you do that is by creating enough fiscal space within the monetary system for us to do that.
Okay, last quick one. So if he's going to cut spending, which areas should he prioritize for his spending, not for his cuts?
Spending.
So I mean, you've got the big things. You've got education and health, call it social services. You've got military.
Well, there's one big thing that he needs to cut: the subsidies. I mean,
no, but what should he keep? What do you think is an important thing for him to keep, or give more resources to?
right now, I would say the salaries, because it's people's livelihoods. We should recognize the state of the nation where we are, that we shouldn't be too ambitious. We should really eat what we kill, and we should just ensure that the public service is okay. So I would cut the public service by half, and then
Double their salary.
double their salaries. That's what I would do.
What did you do?
I wouldn't double anybody's salary.
I'm glad I don't work for you. Where do you think you should
look? I think that we have been so profligate that we shouldn't be thinking about where to spend more money. We should apply all our cognitive energy into how to cut more. And whatever is left, maybe we allocate to what we decide is critical and should continue to be funded. But I think that we should be applying our minds to what can we cut.
And maybe that's a good place to pause for a break. We're going to go to powder our noses, little boy's room, and we'll be back in a couple of minutes. Welcome back. And just before we went away, we were talking about areas of prioritization and so on. But where the discussion had started on the budget was, how did the ministries forecast their requirements for next year? And I find that a very intriguing question, given that we're in the middle of a devaluation of the currency. The rates moved from 88 a few weeks ago on auction to 97 this week. Who knows where it's going to be by December? So how are these guys calling what expenses are going to be next year?
Well, they're forecasting. If you look at...
So you're in Tinashe's basket. The only number that's correct there is the page number.
Pretty much, because their forecasts over the last 5 years have been...
abysmal, to borrow your word.
Putting it politely. And I think that's a problem that we need to discuss vis-a-vis the budget, to say, should we even be thinking about a budget in Zim dollars, right?
It's our national currency.
Yeah, that may well be the case, but is it a currency that we can work with? I mean, look, the central bank, the monetary authority of the country, has set bank capital levels in US dollars, right? They're 30 million for tier one, for example.
Well, please don't remind me.
Okay, so what are they telling us? They're telling us that the Zim dollar numbers don't mean anything. So why are we working with Zim dollar numbers? Right, when I look at them, 900 billion, 3 trillion, what does that mean? Do they mean anything, these numbers, right? Can anybody wrap their brain around them?
So you said
life would be so much easier if we had the US dollar base, right? And we discussed that. Then you could actually compare year on year which ministry is getting allocated more and why or how, and have an interesting discussion, right? But with these Zim dollar numbers, you can't. The numbers don't mean anything. And so why are we using them?
it's our currency.
but it doesn't work. It's dysfunctional. Let's go with what works. And one of the things that I found really positive this week is that what you just alluded to, which is the rate going to 97 from 88.
How's that positive?
Yeah.
So what it tells me is that the central bank has grown out of.
You can see we're really interested in your answer. So be very careful with every word you use.
Right. It's decided that pegging the rate or fixing it at a certain level is clearly unsustainable, and it has to marry the official rate with the parallel rate, or the premium can't be as big as it is, right? So somewhere along the line, when they started arresting people and engaging the market around this, somebody convinced them that actually, 85 doesn't make sense, guys, and they're moving in the right direction. They're not moving as quickly as we would like. They're not moving as transparently as we would like, but they're moving they've actually changed their minds. They've actually realized that 85, 86 doesn't work. We need to be closer to 175.
What's in this?
And that's where they're going. Right? And I commend them.
I have no idea.
Well, maybe it's the bubbles.
Oh.
They're getting to you. You're very optimistic.
No, I'm not. So, look, guys, I'm not making the case that
You are making the case.
we have we have exited Dante's Inferno and we are now in heaven. No, I'm making the case that we were maybe on the 7th level of Dante's Inferno, and we're making our way now on the 6th level. It's better. Is it great? Would I rather not be in Dante's Inferno? Absolutely. But I think the 6th level is less bad than the 7th level.
But
Do you know the 7th level? Dante's 7.
okay, are we about to go down a rabbit hole?
No. But it speaks to what actually the central bank is trying to do. But anyway, what I'm
You know
trying
what
to say
Dante's Inferno is, right?
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
He's the guy who studied literature.
And I'm the 6-year-old.
I'm the guy with the job. He doesn't spend his whole day reading stuff.
But anyway, I have a problem with the central bank and what they're doing. It's no different from what they did with one-to-one gauge, where you then come back. They move from 1-to-1 to interbank to 2.5, and you have people like Rufaro saying, "Well done. That's exactly what we need."
I'm not saying well done, by the way. I'm saying
that's exactly what you're
Less
saying.
badly done. Is it less bad done?
yes.
That's exactly what you're saying. I think we need to go back to the fundamentals. And I'm totally surprised at what Rufaro is saying. And I'll tell you why. Because Rufaro has always been very clear that the central bank or the government of the country must be clear on which route they're taking. It's either free market or it's fixed exchange rate.
In his words, let's not call it an auction if it's not an auction.
If it's not an auction.
Mhm.
So to hear you sit here and then pontificate on how well the governor has done.
I did not use the word well at all.
Because
This guy's putting
it
words
has
in my mouth.
moved from 85 to 97.
I said it's progress. I didn't say
Okay.
But how is it progress?
Okay.
It does not answer the fundamental
Okay, let's
question.
move forward.
So I don't think it's progress at all.
Okay, they've moved. So
And hopefully we'll
they've gone
continue
from
to move.
They've gone from 85 to 97 this week.
George, can I say
The
something?
parallel rate. Well, hang on.
Because I know you're taking this to another level, but I still need to convince him because I know he's not convinced. But
Maybe next week we should all just drink the same thing.
tea.
Okay, yes, carry on.
Rufaro, let's be clear. This reveals a lot about what the central bank is doing. We were told that this was an auction, a Dutch auction, and that the central bank plays no role whatsoever in determining the rate. Now, they're coming and they're telling us now that the rate is 97. What does that say about their first principle?
Everybody in the market just decided to increase their bids this week.
Right.
Oh, that's George, come on, please. No,
It's a 6-year-old.
we're not letting you get away with that. Look, I think, to answer Tinashe, the fact is the central bank treasury in this country over the last 10, 20 years has a very long, well-documented history of, how do I put this politely, chopping and changing, making promises and breaking them. So this is not unusual, right?
agree.
They said it was an auction. It turned out not to be an auction. And, the grapevine, from the government side, was that, they had this model that told them that the rate should be 85, which is why it was at 85 for the longest time. And I think for them to abandon that model and actually say, you know what, maybe we're wrong. Maybe the rate isn't 85 and it should be closer to 175, but we can't be seen to just, let this thing go. We're going to slowly close the gap, which is what they're doing. They're moving. And it's just like your example from 1 to 1 to 1 to 2.5.
So you're assuming that the para market rate is not going to move.
But okay, thank you. So that's the question I was about to ask. Okay, so you say it's less bad than what you were doing before.
Yes, it's certainly less bad.
But is it a stitch in time? Or
it's not.
Or is it too little, too late?
Too
so
little,
when
too late.
You go from 85 versus 190 to 97 versus 190, will 190 stay 190?
No, it's not.
No, but you see, here's the thing. I think the rate is not. The power market is not motivated by what's happening at the auction, right? It's simply motivated by supply-demand dynamics, by how much the government is printing. So they can actually adjust the official rate to 140, 150 without necessarily moving the power rate. What will move the power rate is if they print.
Oh, they cannot, because they have to print, because what's happening is there's a hole at the central bank. So every time you move the exchange rate, so this is why the central bank should not be a player in the market, because they have a perverse incentive to actually ensure that the rate doesn't move. Because every time the rate moves, there are exchange rate losses that are sitting.
But aren't those academics? Aren't those?
No, at some point you need to monetize. They're real.
Because the liabilities the country has outside.
Yeah.
But
at some point you have to
you know
monetize.
what is very interesting about numbers?
Mm-hmm.
Numbers don't lie, right? Mm. So we started today by saying we think Mthuli is forecasting 80 or so % inflation next year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uncle JPM has told us that he intends to print how much per quarter?
20%.
Multiply that by 4.
You get 80%.
So
if you compound it,
okay, yeah, but we're not that clever. Let's keep it simple.
Jab.
So no, we are not that clever. That's simple. So where do you think Mthuli's 80% inflation is coming from? That he's implied in his budget.
I think that's his aspiration. He think that's his best case scenario. That's his best case scenario.
You guys are you guys are missing the point. If Reserve Bank is telling you that their aspiration is to increase money supply by 20% per quarter.
I reserve money, not money supply.
And they like that reserve part of it. Because they don't want to pretend that the rest of money supply isn't important.
But in simple terms, they're going to print 20% per quarter, which is 80% per annum. And the Minister of Finance is expecting his revenues to grow by 80%. Is that a coincidence? Or because these guys are not dumb, they've got degrees in this stuff.
I know we have in Mutombo but we're not throwing any bones or stones. I think I'm not given to speculation.
Yeah, but okay. So
speculate.
Let's look at the data,
please.
Let's look at the data, right?
Oh, really? Now you've said you're not speculating on what he believes.
Well,
anyway.
No, I'm not speculating.
Let's look at what the data tells us, right?
What does the data tell?
So the October inflation numbers out. Month-on-month inflation for the month of October is 6.4%.
Food inflation, which is what everybody really cares about, is almost 7.5%.
Okay, right. So, and because I'm cleverer than you, I actually compounded over the next 12 months and worked out exactly what 6.4% month-on-month means over a year, and that's 110%. Yeah, that's hyperinflation territory.
Well, hyperinflation is actually 30% per annum. We're already in hyperinflation.
So
don't you read the annual reports?
No.
I think accounting hyperinflation is different from economic hyperinflation, but you're both
three-digit inflation is hyperinflationary.
It's not, but it's not the point.
But anyway, look,
Sakai, please take that stuff away from me.
So the outlook is really quite bleak from an inflation standpoint. And I think that if we look at government's historical performance in terms of their forecasts, when you actually marry them to reality, 80% is the best case scenario, gentlemen. Reality is going to be much worse.
We've got an election. I think I tend to buy into what Rufaro said.
You guys are extremely depressing.
No election. I mean, just if you look at the history of government forecasts around any key indicator you like, inflation, GDP growth, deliveries at GMB, look at any number that they've forecasted.
We're on 1.1 million tons.
Of grain.
Yes. But do you know what the forecast was? 2.4.
8.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So they're still
People are keeping it in their granaries.
underperforming epically, right? They threatened for the first time ever.
And you know what's very interesting?
to-
Just to tie in the thinking, yeah. You know, he says food inflation is what?
7%.
So how do you
7.4%.
have the best harvest in ever, and you have food inflation going up? That should make you think.
No, people like imported things.
Really?
Yeah.
We import most of our food. Is that your point?
Yeah.
Did maize
If you
have
have
our staple?
So if you have an excess supply of food, what should have happened? If you had an excess supply of or an excess harvest, what should happen is you should have deflation in food items. So you have lots of goods, and then the price actually comes down less than last year's. So people are getting more food for the same price. So you cannot then have month-on-month food inflation of about.
I'll tell you an interesting
7%.
product that's got negative inflation.
Yeah.
Peanut butter.
Okay.
Interesting.
We're
Because-
producing a lot of.
Yeah, and interestingly, it's not grown commercially generally. People grow for their own consumption, and yes, they did have a good harvest.
So
and the
it then
price of
translates.
peanut butter.
I mean, this is what I love about economics. Thanks for that
It's
example.
an anecdote.
It's an important anecdote. This is what I love about economics.
I don't like anecdotes.
Yeah, but it's an important anecdote. I'm glad you say that. But we use that to backtest numbers, right? So whenever the government tells us that, okay, we've had a fantastic harvest, then we'll say, oh, okay, do we believe you or don't we believe you? And we backtest. And an easy backtest is, well, if food inflation is going up and you guys are claiming to have had a really good harvest, how does that work out? Right? Doesn't work out. So it means that the very good harvest was probably not a good harvest. Otherwise, food inflation wouldn't be going up. Otherwise, we wouldn't be importing food.
Absolutely.
Right? And I agree with what Rufaro is saying, that there's nothing that the government has said that is credible. And that's the crisis that they face, that they're just not credible enough. That's why people are holding on to US dollars and are not holding on to Zim dollars.
But it's not just that, there's a credibility gap. I also think there's a vision challenge, right? So I think at the risk of getting into a rabbit hole, one of the more interesting developments this week, in my opinion, is Tesla reaching $1 trillion.
I knew you were going to try and figure that. I knew that was coming. It was going to somehow work its way into the show.
Right? This is a company that didn't.
Tesla he's a fan of Tesla.
This is a company that didn't exist 18 years ago, right? But it's created $1 trillion worth of value, right? Zimbabwe has been independent for 41 years. And if you take the Ministry of Finance's rebasement at face value, we are all of a $25 billion economy. What's our vision for the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? How much wealth are we looking to create, right? In the context of what has been achieved by one individual, right?
So Zim Stats actually came up with their numbers for 2020, and it's very interesting. Since 1980, the Zim GDP was 6.6 in 1980. Was 6.6 billion. In 2000, guess how much it was? 6.6.
In 20 years, we won't know.
So it tells us, and
our population grew.
Our population has actually now grown to 16 million, and the latest number from 2020, depending on which currency you're using and how you're converting it, but we can use the World Bank number. Our economy is now a $16 billion economy.
So my question is,
Okay, we've got to go for a break.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
You can ask your question when we come back, but I think you need to go to the bathroom. So let's give him a couple of minutes, and we'll be right back. And we're back. You were making a point before you had to go to the bathroom.
Yeah. I was talking about what
You could actually say no. I wasn't going to go to the bathroom.
Well, you did. I did.
Go ahead.
You know, we're in the 21st century, and I think that wealth creation in the 21st century is very different from the 20th or the 19th, when we had the Industrial Revolution that made the West wealthy. And I think that when we are discussing the budget, right, like, what are their aspirations? Where do they see us as a country, as an economy, 10, 20, 30 years from now? Are they being ambitious enough, right? Because if Elon Musk can create $1 trillion in wealth in 2 decades, right, shouldn't we as a country have ambitions that are bigger than an individual? And when you look at the Vision 2030 and the numbers that they're talking about, they're not inspiring. Why is that? Why don't we have a big vision?
Because we have sanctions.
You think it's sanctions are stopping us from reaching our full potential?
Well, it's been in the news all week.
Well, look at, okay, so Ian Smith declared UDI in 1965. There were sanctions. Okay, economic growth slowed, but the economy continued to grow, and it was functional. So what's our problem?
Well, and it's an interesting point. Also look at the likes of North Korea, Cuba.
We don't want to get inspiration from them.
But if you actually look at the growth of the past 20 years, and I actually looked at some graphs this afternoon, and maybe the producer will put them on the screen. They've actually had consistent GDP growth over 20 years,
notwithstanding sanctions.
Yeah, and when you look at our own growth trajectory over the same period, it's a little bit all over the place.
Look, so I think, I saw something online. It was about life in general, but I'm going to use it in the context of sanctions or any other challenge an economy has.
Are you getting philosophical?
Yes, I am. So the point is, the point this person was making on Twitter is that life is not plain sailing, right? And any excuse you give for not achieving your dreams, aspirations, should be looked at like a child talking about their dog eating their homework. Okay. Things aren't always going to work out the way you want. There are going to be obstacles and challenges in the way, and you have to persevere and succeed in spite of these. So we can't say, well, we didn't succeed because of sanctions or because of drought or because of whatever. I mean, look, we were talking about.
I think maybe I can contribute here. I think talking about sanctions and hearing the anti-sanctions mantra, I think it reveals a lot about our leaders, that they are totally clueless and they don't realize what they were supposed to do in 1980. If we look at the GDP numbers, as we've said, that it was a $6.7 billion economy. And 20 years later, it was still a $6 billion economy. Kenya in 1990 was smaller than Zimbabwe. Today, Kenya is 6 times bigger than Zimbabwe. Kenya has not done anything phenomenal. So there's nothing that you can look at the Kenya economy and say, oh, it's an Elon Musk inspired economy. No, it's not. And corruption is equally in Zimbabwe.
It's probably worse in Kenya.
Worse in Kenya. So it's not corruption. But I think that what the Kenyans have done is they've just done the very bare minimum. And what it tells us is that the opportunity cost to Zimbabwe's misgovernance
It's huge.
is huge. It's 100 billion.
Well, but
And that's the problem. The problem is, as long as we have the leadership capacity, we don't have to be an Elon Musk.
Tinashe, I think I agree with you 80%, but I think we make a mistake of pinning it on the government. I think it's a national mindset. Look, you and I, between the two of us, have probably lived in 15 or 20 countries. And I'll bet you agree with me that when you came back, the one thing that struck you when you were here is the number of conversations you had with people where they said, but this is Zimbabwe.
Absolutely.
And you just cannot understand how, if this works everywhere else in the world, we think it won't work here. And we think we play by a different rule book. I actually
accept your argument, George. But I had a debate with somebody on a similar issue, and they changed my mind totally about these things. Because I kept on saying,
I'm very interested.
Somebody changed his mind.
This is a rare event. Tinashe changing his mind.
oh yeah.
Oh my gosh.
If you have a very strong argument and it's evidence-based, that's something I've learned about evidence-based management.
I await the details.
This person convinced you that.
They convinced me that if you think about it, we're a nation state, right? So the leader in a nation state is government. So we are only a subset of the nation state. So there's a lot that we could do as individuals. And that's why 5 million individuals decided that actually the way this nation was being led is not congruent with their own aspirations, and they were better off elsewhere.
And they left.
So while you are correct that we as the people can change things and can do, the leader of the nation is the government, for better or worse, whether we like it or not. Because we as individuals, we don't set the tax policy. We as individuals, we're not the ones who led us into hyperinflation. We're not the ones who decided on these big nation-wide questions. So I was of your belief until I was convinced that unless government, because they are our leader, better or worse, whether we vote them or we don't vote them, they have the mandate at the present moment. They're in the driver's seat. And it's up to them to show good leadership and not misleading.
Look, I hear what you're saying, but I on this I tend to agree with George. And I'll give you an anecdotal example. Notwithstanding, notwithstanding that, but I think it will make my point quite well. So I remember back in the pre-2008, in the Zim dollar era, Herbert Murerwa was Minister of Finance. He woke up one morning.
We now look on that guy like a saint.
He woke up one morning and he decided that people who are making profits, buying and selling shares, aren't contributing enough to the fiscus. He came up with tax on the sell side, capital gains tax on the sell side of shares that was quite high. I don't remember the amount, the percentage. And the stockbrokers had a meeting and they decided that that wasn't acceptable, right? This is bad for the capital market. It's bad for our industry. It can't stand. And to make the point to the minister, we are going to stop trading forthwith until he changes his mind. We're not going to negotiate with him. We're not going to say, okay, you know what, your number is too high. Let's meet halfway. Let's have a conversation. They say, no, it can't. And they stopped trading. And the minister did a complete reversal. And he did away.
I get you.
Right? So the business community, the private sector has some leverage, it has some power. Right? Now, fast forward to June 2020, right? The government decides that what's happening with Old Mutual is what's motivating movement on the power market. These stockbrokers, they're the problem. Let's shut down their market. And the market was closed for 30 days. Did the brokers make any noise? Did they go to court? Did they express that this was completely unacceptable? No. They were pliant. They were meek.
I think this- I think
that
that's-
supports George's point that it's not just up to leadership in government. Everybody else in the economy who's got a stake has to put their hand up and engage and say
We're all stakeholders, but the leader is
No, but okay, sorry.
that's why it's a nation state.
But I just think it's important that we just sort of come back to what Rufaro was saying and just be clear. We're not. I don't suppose that you're calling for all-out rebellion or anything like that, but dialogue.
No,
engagement.
No. What he's saying is that we're all stakeholders and we have some power. Now, I think he's overestimating.
No, but I don't.
Power.
But
not overestimating.
No.
You are.
But
You are
Tinashe,
overestimating.
I think that the point is already you're spoiling the discussion by using words like power. I think what he's saying is, and we've seen this, and you guys had a chat about it last week about conferences and whether they yield anything. Perhaps the word is kowtowing. There's a term called
to power, right?
yeah, but there's okay, and we're actually bringing it together.
Okay.
There's a term called the hippo point of view, the highest income person point of view in a room, which it happens even in private sector. That when the boss says something, the boss could say the sky is pink with yellow polka dots, and if there isn't engagement in that organization, it becomes organizational policy and belief that the sky is pink with yellow polka dots. But the boss is not necessarily a bad person, and he actually would benefit from somebody saying, well,
Actually, the sky's blue.
maybe actually look out of the window
And see.
and see.
There's something that I would like to say when you look at Elon Musk. Why is it Elon Musk left South Africa and ended up in America? I mean, if the government of South Africa, whether the apartheid or post-apartheid government, was really a good government, would Elon Musk and a lot more entrepreneurs who left South Africa, would they have left? In fact, there's a study that's been done that there are actually more billionaires, South African-born billionaires, outside in the world than they are in South Africa.
Well, our own billionaire, Strive,
Exactly.
lives in London.
So
why doesn't that?
we've got two.
Oh, we've got two. Who's the other one?
You don't pay attention in our shows.
Roditi.
Ah, okay.
Do you remember one of our first shows?
Yes, I remember vaguely.
But the point is, if we call it a nation state, right, because we've called it a nation state, and what you guys are calling for, actually, it's music to my ears. That's the libertarian society, where we actually do not have government as a leader, because these are the problems when you then have a nation state and you have the government as the leader of that nation state. And what you're calling for, if you want the power distributed to all the other...
It's not even about power. You see,
I don't like the word power.
So here's why it's not
I don't
about
know, why don't you like the word power?
Okay, that's a separate
another
discussion. But I don't think it's about
surprised.
power. I don't
It
think
is, because
Okay, so let me
what you
explain
saying-
why it's not about power, right?
Okay.
Because the three of us are
This
involved,
feels like a rabbit hole.
in running businesses, okay? And we actually don't care who the personalities are in government offices, right? What we care about is the policies and the way they affect our businesses, right? And I suspect that the policies that are good for business are actually great for politicians because they lead to prosperity for most.
No, that's not true. That's why there's this word called moral hazard. In a society,
Did I just let you guys get into a rabbit hole?
the minute you call it a nation state, there's a social contract. And the social contract is such that we give up part of our essence as individuals, right? And we say, you know what, I have all these responsibilities and obligations, and but I'm going to give them away to this institution called government, right? And I'm allowing that institution to lead me. We all agree to that. So when we vote, with everything that we do, we give that power to that institution called government. And then we have, depending on what sort of democracy you have a Westminster. And I don't want to get into the
You're getting into it. Can you? There's a point to this, right?
The point I'm trying to say is,
Thank you.
the leader of a nation state is government, for better or worse, whether I agree to it or not. So you can't tax people.
Is the US a nation state?
Yes, all our nations. Very few nations are libertarian nations, right? All our nations are nation states. All the nations of the world, those are nation states. It's either you can be a republic, or you can be a monarch, or you can be
so the reason why I asked about the US is
U.S. society.
some countries create lots of powerful entrepreneurs, right? In fact, quite recently, the CEO of Pepsi, I forget her name.
Yeah, she was Indian.
She made an interesting comment that went viral about how running Pepsi, and how Pepsi is like a republic in its own right. It's so big and it's so powerful, right?
She's delusional.
No, I don't think she is.
Okay.
Look at what Joe Biden has done.
But
We're not going down that rabbit hole. We're not going down that rabbit hole. And actually, this is actually a very good point to end the show, because I don't know what's in that tea, Sekai. You need to subject that to some chemical analysis.
Shrub.
And no more bubbles for you. Stick to whiskey. But we will let you have the last word.
No, actually, my last word is on my phone, and I don't have it.
And there you have it. You really shouldn't be taking us seriously, because we actually are not that serious, and we have no idea what we're talking about.
But this is here for a reason, I suspect.
Yes, it is. Would you like to remind the viewers?
Yeah, so in the finale, there's going to be, we're going to give away a bunch of these to people who engage with us on YouTube.
So please continue engaging, and you might win one of those. You'll be interested to know my 2-year-old son has been going through my copy, and there's a diagram of a whiskey factory in there, a distillery. And every time he picks up the book, he flips to that page, and he makes me tell him what each piece of the factory is. That is true. He's headed for great things in life.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
It's been lovely. It's been lovely having you around. Enjoy your weekend. We hope we've inspired some thoughts. We've inspired some discussions between you and yours. Stay safe. COVID is real. If you can't be good at it.